Evening, everybody. My name is Sarah Coonan. I work for Farming for Nature. I'm subbing for Bridget this evening. Farming for Nature is a not-for-profit initiative where we hope to inspire and empower farmers to farm more in tune with nature. Tonight we're joined by Jack Browne, who's an organic tillage farmer in near Tullow in County Carlow. So I'll be putting a few questions to him, and he'll be telling us about his story. And then there'll be an opportunity for you to put your questions in the chat box throughout the chat, and I'll put them to him at the end. So that's the schedule, and if you happen to miss anything, um, I will be uploading the video to YouTube tomorrow. So without further ado, maybe Jack, you might introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your farm.
Great, thanks, sir. Yeah, as you said, I'm farming just outside Tullow, County Carlow. Been farming organically since 2020. Um, I guess it was before that, it was a share farm, where I didn't have a huge amount to contribute. And before that, then it was our family farm here, which mixed enterprise. So I I work full time off farm. I work as an engineer, and I guess I'd always kind of hoped to maybe get the farm back to that kind of low input, low output system that I remember. I guess seeing the larger farming enterprise here on the farm during those years that was share farmed galvanized the fact that I knew I wasn't maybe going to compete with that kind of commodity type farming and go into it wholesale. Like there's about 36 hectares here, so it's kind of not quite big enough to support a family, depending on who you ask or what you're doing. I knew I was always going to go and pursue some engineering and make that my full-time job. So part-time farming and then part-time farming that didn't negatively impact the environment was a big motivation for some of the decisions I made. Um, so yeah, started exploring organic just as a way of trying to move away from fertilizers and pesticides. I'd done my green cert at the same time, and then Kildalton, I got a great education in what was kind of required to run a farm, but I also it kind of made me realize that I didn't want to be a farmer in 20 to 30 years who knew all of the herbicides and compound fertilizers off by heart. I'd rather spend time learning about plants and trees and cover crops, soil health. So I converted to organic, and then I was also interested in permaculture and the ideas of having a food forest around the farm just to feed myself and a potential family that we might have here. And yeah, just explored those ideas and got, I guess, sucked into a bit of a rabbit hole with different practitioners around the world. And then in the UK, like Stephen Briggs and the system he was doing with the agroforestry, and then I guess seeing the farming for nature videos at that stage as well was a big part of my inspiration to try something a little bit different. So I set myself a goal of trying to plant 20 trees per year, and I started that and kind of kept going. I applied for a forestry license to plant 7 acres of native woodland in a kind of wet, rocky corner of the field, which was suffering from a little bit of erosion. It was the lowest point in the field. And I work in water and wastewater, so I'm quite conscious of trying to keep our waterways relatively clean. So I didn't like seeing silt washing off the farm and down towards the Slaney River here. And then the Slaney River would have been somewhere I spent a lot of my youth swimming and building rafts and stuff. So I was always conscious of doing my best by that. Um, So then, yeah, planted a few trees around the house, experimenting with fruit trees and berry bushes, and different plants that I'd had no experience of before. And then I decided I'd maybe go a bit bigger and plant some trees out in the field. But so the two fields here, um, there'd been a few ditches taken out to open it up for the share farmer who's farming just conventional tillage crops. So I wanted to put some wildlife corridors and trees back in, but didn't really know where to start. So it was actually the Irish Agroforestry Forum. I started asking a few questions, just um, kind of what's the difference between planting east west or east west versus north south, and if there was going to be much of a difference. And yeah, there was some very helpful voices in that forum and still are. And that's where I was introduced to Imogen Rabone, Trees on the Land. And I guess that kind of changed everything on the farm here, that she had funding for an EIP project and needed a demonstration site. And yeah, just asked me to be a little bit more ambitious with my plans for putting rows of trees into some good Carlow tillage land. A few of my neighbours and family members thought I was a little bit mad, but yeah, that was kind of 2021 and 22, and still did a little bit of planting in early 23. And it was over those few years that we developed a plan, marked out the rows, and started buying and planting trees.
So the field, I've visited your farm twice now, and it's actually incredible to see even the growth in just a couple of years of them being planted. So it's easy to imagine in the surrounding countryside what that field did look like. What area is that area that you've planted up with your with trees, and maybe you explain the system of planting.
Yes, there was a few ditches taken out, and it was 70 acres was the larger field. We took 7 acres of that and put it into the native woodland down in the low corner. And then, kind of following those permaculture principles, I wanted to put the high value, high maintenance crops closer to the house and yard, the ones that need pruning and fruit picking eventually. So those were spaced at 27 meters, just following the Stephen Briggs model in the UK. And the alleys then are 24 meters, so it leaves kind of 3 meters for the trees to grow out either side. And in there was a mixture of apples, plums, pears, some cherry trees, and interspersed in between there were alders. The alders were there to fix nitrogen, but also as biomass, just to try and um, provide a bit of faster growing biomass to help with wind speeds and shelter, because while we're quite close to the Slaney, we're not on high ground at all. It was still 70 acres with no hedgerows in it, so there's still the risk of wind and not a huge amount of shelter. So just trying to add what little shelter I could. And then, so we did 5 rows at that spacing. And as we went further away from the house, we put in some of the less, the trees that required less maintenance. So there was nuts down the bottom of the field. So we've a good few hazelnuts. There are some walnuts, sweet chestnuts, um, and then further again, we went into biomass trees and some timber trees. And then I was also starting an organic rotation, so I wanted to break the farm up into 5 different fields, and it actually worked out to break it up into evenly sized fields was an 81-meter spacing to the next row of trees after those 27-meter rows, which also means that if I want to add more of those 27-meter rows in the future, that it is divisible by 27. But then those trees are more like hedgerows, I suppose. But I guess hedgerows designed with a few different functions in mind. There was, I said, timbers, trees, some biomass trees. So again, some hazels there that I plan to uh, coppice. There's some walnut for furniture at some stage in the future, oak trees. And yeah, we tried to put those larger growing timber varieties in the middle and then put the faster growing, like some willow as well, just for biomass, and those hazels either side of it to try and grow some straight timber in the middle of a field, which isn't always possible. And I guess that's part of the reason that the agroforestry scheme has a maximum width of 20 meters at the moment. I went a lot further than that, but they're trying to grow timber trees, so I guess it's understandable why
Mm.
they have those specifications.
And as you saying earlier that you it was kind of chosen as a demonstration site, is there anything you've learned or have benefited from even at this early stage, or challenges or things that you wouldn't do again, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll start with the challenges and then finish on the benefits. The yeah, understory management is something that I maybe didn't properly understand or give enough thought to. I probably would go for maybe some more densely planted trees. So my trees are 4 meters apart, in those, say, high value alleys close to the house. Now, there are trees that are 1 meter and even half a meter apart, and some of the other, so the windbreak rows and the rows that are further away from the house, the biomass ones. But even where there are fruit trees, it probably could have done with putting in some sacrificial trees in the middle or something that would have been either chopped and dropped or moved at some stage. And that's just for ground cover. Like the first year we put in um, a butterfly pollinator mix from uh, Crucial Farm, and that worked quite well. But it wasn't long before the docks and the thistles and the nettles were all poking up through it and have kind of taken over in parts. But yeah, I'm kind of happy enough to live with that for the time being. And yeah, it was only afterwards as well. I maybe learned a little bit more about like syntropic agroforestry. So I guess I probably focused on what I wanted things to look like in 20 years rather than what they were going to look like for the 20 years in between. Um, but yeah, other than that, um, they were kind of the main challenges so far. And then yeah, the benefits, like the place is alive with pollinators and different insects, and then yeah, the whole food chain has kind of exploded. There was even in the first year there was an awful lot more pheasants. There were there were rabbits. We tried to control them a little bit. I had someone come in and do some hunting just to try and keep the rabbit numbers down so that it wouldn't be too much damage, but also the extra habitat allowed for extra buzzards to come in and hunt the little mammals that were hiding in there. So I think they also helped to control the rabbit numbers. Like even a juvenile buzzard flew into our back kitchen in 2023 here. So that was kind of a big indication to me that things were moving in the right direction. We also have barn owl. Um, that's been spotted here a good few times. We have some nest boxes up now, 3 acres. So yeah, there's an awful lot more life around, and yeah, that's partly because of the uncultivated strips in the middle, but also just organic and attempting to do min-till as well. So there's nearly always something growing, whether I want to do or not.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's never brown. there's always greenery here. So I think that does an awful lot to keep small animals here and feeding, and that kind of promotes the whole food chain.
So you have something to say to your detractors, maybe. Uh, just on the on covering the ground and stuff, have you noticed any difference in your soil year on year? I know you have converted to organic as well, so maybe it's hard to say. But maybe just off the cuff. Excuse me.
Yeah, earthworm numbers have definitely increased, and that's so like within the rows. Not every tree got planted, so there's a few gaps that I'm still filling in, and then we have a few losses. Like we bring sheep in here to graze every winter. Sometimes they escape. Usually we catch them in time before they do any damage. But yeah, I think each year they've been here, maybe I've lost one tree. So I have some replacements in healed into an area near the house here. So I go and plant them. So when I put the shovel in into those rows that haven't been touched, I definitely noticed that it is lovely dark soil with lots of earthworms in it. Um, so yeah, just kind of yeah, my own observations. We did do some baseline surveys as part of the DAP project, which are great to have that funding because yeah, to do microbiological analysis of the fungi and the bacteria and even carbon core sampling. Like it's not cheap, so I was very lucky that I was part of that project and they were able to do a baseline. So then yeah, that was in 2022. So I think 5 years might be a good time to revisit that. And yeah, even if it would be nice to do a full suite of analysis and copy the same tests and analysis again. But if I can't get funding for that, I'll definitely just do a pared back version myself, just for my own interest to see what's happening because we took carbon samples and organic matter and tested the fungal bacterial ratio like within the rows and then 3 meters outside the rows, 6 meters outside the rows, and 12 meters outside the rows to see if that uncultivated area was having an impact and how far that impact was stretching. And then I guess as part of the organic farming, I have quite good records. So while there is noise to the data that we don't know what maybe would be the reason for any changes, because as it converted to organic, converted to min-till, and put in the agroforestry system all at the same time, it'd be hard to know exactly where the benefits are coming from. But yeah, then as part of the organic in my first year, I planted some multi-species swords, and this spring then was my first time ploughing in some of that. So it gone 3 or 4 years without any ploughing on the farm, but I knew that to terminate the multi-species, I'd need to plough. So that was um, yeah, very interesting to see that, and the root biomass was vast when the plows came in and started turning it up, and there was yeah heaps of carbon there, I hope, and yeah, nitrogen. And there's a crop of hemp in that field now, yeah, and some oats in one area of it, and yeah, they seem to be thriving on it. So there's obviously been a decent amount of nutrition pumped into the soil because of that multi-species. And I had been taking small cuts of haylage and hay from it once a year as well. So I was a little bit worried that I might have been taking too much, but um, yeah, trying not to sell too much of that and keep it on the farm because we have horses that will eat that, and then using um, the horse manure and to compost and run a nice hot compost with yeah any kind of old bales or anything that isn't eaten. Like a couple of years just because of weather. I ended up with quite stemmy uh, hay that was made in September one year. And then another year I had too much chicory in it. So there was a lot of unused fodder on the farm. So then to be able to throw that into a compost heap with the horse manure, and then that went out onto the multi-species before it was ploughed in, just to less as replacements for the P's and K's, but more as maybe just a boost to the microbiology.
Yeah, very good. And how do you go about making your compost? Do you have storage? How often do you turn it? What's your method, I suppose?
Yeah, so we have a slatted unit here, so we don't have any cattle, but there are we have the slats covered and there are horses on it, but the slatted unit extends out into a farmyard. So I tip everything up there and it drains into the slatted unit. So it kind of works just as a temporary storage, but then it's also an area that I can access with the digger and turn it there. So um, just kind of depends on how much time I have available. Though at the start, when I was getting into it, I was quite good at turning it every month. And yeah, you get big plumes of steam coming off it every time. Now I do try and turn it maybe once in the first couple of months after it gets the sheds get emptied, and we kind of mix everything together. But yeah, it's between 1 and 3 months usually. And yeah, I favor kind of turning it at the start. And yeah, I'd like to be able to turn it more frequently, but it's just not that high on the list of priorities all the time.
Sure. Um, I'm sure there's no end to the jobs. I suppose the compost being one aspect, how else are you managing the organic tillage system and rotation? I'm sure it may have been a learning curve. There'd be lots of detractors saying it's very, very difficult. How has it been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm fortunate enough that I work full time on a farm. That's my main income. This is maybe more of a hobby than an income stream. Um, I wanted to try and put in as little as possible just to see like what the limits are. I've been taking out very little. Yields have been very low. So and there was, I guess, two reasons for that. One was just like not fully understanding the market. Because coming from a co-op system where it's very easy just to go and tip up a load of grain and get your check. Uh, I wanted to see where I could maybe find a bit more profit. And yeah, the organic market is a small slice of Irish agriculture, so you kind of have to go looking for it yourself. And yeah, I still haven't necessarily found what I want to be producing. This year I'm experimenting with the hemp, the first year with that. So that's kind of the cash crop year this year. That's why it's getting the best land after that multi-species, and it seems to be doing quite well because of it. The the other years then I've experimented with combi crops, oats and peas, and then doing straight oats and straight peas. The oats, I just wanted to try and produce a food crop. So I was selling into Tier um, who were accepting organic oats up until last year, but they've decided to stop this year. So now it's, I guess, Flavins. I'm hoping we'll take some of them. But yeah, again, yields were quite low. I was relatively happy with that. Like I know there is an option there to go and get whether it's chicken manure or other organic fertilizers to try and increase yields. But yeah, as I was getting set up, I didn't want to kind of have. those input costs before I knew what market I was focusing on and where the outputs were going to go. Um, and then the peas and yeah, any of the animal feed I've produced, I've been lucky enough that I have neighbours here who are uh, farming organic beef, and they've taken a good bit of the feed that I've produced. So kind of it's been easy enough to break even, um, and then yeah, using I guess some of the profit to reinvest in machinery, and yeah, I've been the minimum tillage definitely resulted in a lot more weed pressure, which drove down yields a little bit. But then, like chopping all the straw and that extra biomass going back in, I think did help the soil health to a certain extent. So just taking less off, and hoping that the soil biology will start to improve and mean that there's more nutrition available there going forward. Um, yeah, so I lost my train of thought there, but
No, you're grand. I suppose from a permaculture perspective, would it be fair to say that you're sort of stacking potential future income streams, which aren't necessarily going to benefit you straight away, but you mentioned fruit and nut, and timber trees. There's a question just in the chat there from Sean about are you going to coppice some trees, or is there any other things that you're thinking about in terms of income, I suppose?
yeah, so I guess because it was a demonstration site and a European funded project, we went as diverse as we could, with lots of different species and lots of different varieties within those species. So, yeah, like if I was to do it as a commercial enterprise, I'd probably pick less and have more of them. But I guess the apples seem to be doing quite well. Again, it's kind of down to how much I've been putting in. I haven't given them a huge amount of fertility. I probably will start thinking about that a bit more seriously next year. Start to think about getting a bit more yield from them. Um, and yeah, the time and effort that goes into managing the understory and keeping that a bit tidier. So yeah, I was kind of letting the trees grow a little bit first and letting them establish and seeing what was going to grow well, what wasn't going to grow well, rather than just horsing on a load of compost and wood chips and mulch and everything onto every tree and spending a lot of time and money doing it, only for something to fail. And it's also like the birds out there are getting most of the fruit. There was a decent crop of, there were small cherries, but there were cherries, but like they're all gone within a few weeks. Same with like plums, and the apples last a bit longer. It was kind of just enough to for ourselves and to give away a few. We also planted some berry bushes and stuff in between. And again, you get a few handfuls ourselves, but the birds get most of them. So again, it's a case of do I buy nets and kind of go down that route? And yeah, I just don't think the plants are big enough to justify that yet. But yeah, definitely in the next couple of years they will be. And then in terms of coppicing, yeah, I mean, a lot of the willow is probably there to run through my wood chipper and to act as a bit of mulch for those higher value trees. I remember I think it was someone from Wakelands in the UK was talking about hazel pole production, and they mentioned that it's like almost as profitable as some of their vegetables. So I think that day or the next day I went out and ordered another couple of hundred hazel trees to put in the kind of biomass rows. So yeah, those hazels are earmarked for kind of a 5 or 7 year rotation on the coppicing. And then likewise the alders, which are in between the fruit trees, they're there to fix nitrogen and add a bit of shelter. So whether copse or pollard them, but to definitely be kind of restricting their growth in order to just keep them at the size I want them for the shelter and not letting them get too big and um, adding shade to the system too much.
And where would you go now if you were advising somebody at the start? Who would you direct them to for either silvoarable systems or agroforestry resources or permaculture organic? Like who have been your influences?
Yeah, I mean, the Martin Crawford book, the forest gardening, like that's for our climate. That has every plant in there that you could possibly think of adding to a system. Um, yeah, I think we'd all love to have a garden like his, but it's not going to happen.
Mm.
um, it's something to aspire to maybe, and getting enough plants and like even some of those understory plants to work within an agroforestry system would be a challenge and quite costly. But yeah, that was I read that book cover to cover before I started making a plan, and that was a massive influence. And then yeah, the Irish Agroforestry Forum, just asking questions in there and attending lots of their events and just yeah, looking around to see who else is doing it and asking questions. Like it's like the Farming for Nature group. It's kind of a community where people like to help each other, and yeah, there's no stupid questions. Everyone kind of wants other people to kind of get on board with this idea that yeah, there's lots of plants out there that we haven't maybe explored enough, and that too much of our food is coming from too few plants.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, I believe climate action was part of your motivation for planting so many trees. And Sean has a couple of questions related to climate in the chat. And I'll just put them to you. They're maybe a wee bit technical, but if all of agriculture applied organic agroforestry, would it neutralize the CO2 from cattle and machinery? Does anybody have the figures on that?
So looking at, there's actually been some work done in that respect, and I think there's an organic farmer on YouTube, John Pawsey, and he's doing organic no-till with um this particular or an inter-row system. Is it no-till or min-till? But anyways, and yeah, he worked out that I think just by the additional organic matter that they were adding to their farm, which was whatever, a couple of thousand acres, um, that it was offsetting the diesel consumption. Um, yeah, look, I've looked at carbon footprinting a little bit myself. I did a graduate diploma in carbon footprinting and life cycle assessment and had a look at my own boats here on the farm just to try and better understand where the carbon is going. And yeah, it doesn't always look great for organic farming. Like I cultivate 3 times a year to try and get a stale seed bed, and the nitrous oxide emissions from those cultivations are not properly understood. But at one end of the range, um, it it nearly negates the fact that there's no fertilizer being used.
Wow.
But like there's an awful lot of variables and there's not enough study done, I think, on that end of things. But yeah, I mean, ultimately the trees are there. They're a good carbon sink. I'm trying to get more organic matter into the soil. Um, will it negate everything? I'm not sure. I mean, part of the reason I planted the 7 acres of native woodland is that I'm guilty of enjoying a cheap Ryanair flight every now and again, and don't always offset it. So yeah, there's what can you do and what can't you do, and yeah, I think like the carbon market is still in development. I think the UK, there's a lot going on there with carbon credits, especially with the abolition of the cap, and they're looking for new funding mechanisms. So yeah, I'd probably be watching over there quite closely and see if someone's willing to kind of nail their colours to the mast and say, yes, we are a carbon neutral farm or carbon negative farm. Um, like a lot in the regenerative space will say that you can't be carbon neutral or negative without having livestock to recycle the nutrients. Some people don't agree with that and think that rewilding is the only way to um, be carbon negative. But I think there's yeah a lot of work being done, and hopefully in the next few years we'll get some better results because, like as I said, these studies they need 5 years to be worth what they're written on, and they won't be published or peer reviewed without that type of data. So there's a lot of stuff that's happened in the last 10 to 20 years that the research is only kind of starting to be published on now.
It's kind of an interesting space, even in terms of how organic tillage and no-till might seem at odds, even sometimes, or there's a bit of a conflict there. How do you view that?
I mean, I think organic no-till would be great if it was possible.
Mm.
There are some people doing it, and yeah, I think it relies on um, mechanical solutions and expensive tractors and expensive machinery. So yeah, I mean, I guess in our temperate climate where everything's trying to slowly move back towards forest via grass and
Mm.
pioneer species, um, it's difficult to see how you manage those weeds and those plants and get crops that you want without using a plow or herbicides.
Mm.
I'd I'd love for it to be possible, and yeah, I'll keep experimenting and playing around, but yeah, I don't think I'll be putting my kids through college on it.
Fair enough. Um, if anyone has any more questions, please throw them up in the chat and I'll field them as they come in. I suppose otherwise, in terms of the nature that has sort of come back, what have you noticed? Obviously you've filled the place with trees, so it's probably a good starting point.
Yeah, yeah, I mentioned the pheasants that are around and having that habitat to walk up and down the field in all year. Then yeah, the more buzzards, like kind of there was one buzzard around, and now there's three. Um, the barn owls that we see regularly enough. Good few skylarks. And yeah, there's plenty of small mammals, shrews and mice in the rows as well. Um, Other than that, then yeah, there's the earthworm population. Um, I have a microscope that I've been meaning to spend more time looking through, but it doesn't always happen, and I don't always know what I'm looking at either. So, yeah, I'd I'd like to know a little bit more about what's going on under the soil, but yeah, above the soil, there's definitely more habitat and there are more animals. I did see a deer running through here last week, which was slightly concerning, but I think I'm out of the woods, so to speak. in terms of deer damage. I was quite worried about it at the start because we didn't protect most of our trees. We put spiral guards on some of them, but made a conscious decision not to stake them, to allow the trees just to make their own way. And it probably has resulted in them not growing as much as they would have if they were staked and protected. But yeah, they're still, now they're very hardy, kind of wonky looking trees. But yeah, the deer, they seem to maybe think there's a little bit more shelter for them to pass through this field now compared to some of my neighbours' fields, and they are nibbling on the willow and stuff, which again is there as almost sacrificial, so they can have that as long as they stay away from the high value ones. Um, but yeah, other than that, there's nothing coming to mind at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough. There's a question in from Kea. Kia, sorry if I'm butchering that. Did you ever have someone over to map the wildlife on your farm?
Yeah, so part of that baseline survey, there was um, oh, name one of the guys from Imogen's team came and did a bird survey and just listened for bird song. Um, so yeah, that was
Prior
the
to
only,
planting?
yeah, or just after the first year of planting.
Okay. Um, and secondly, what are you going to do with the hemp?
So the hemp is for seed production, and yeah, there's a local farmer here has a cold press for producing cold pressed seed oil, hemp seed oil. So yeah, you have to get the license to grow the hemp. You have to have uh, a contract in place for someone to take it, and yeah, that's like the only processing that's licensed at the moment is the seed. There's nowhere for the fiber, or um, there might be some way of processing the flour, but yeah, mostly it's for seed production in Ireland at the moment. So yeah, it would be nice to have an old 1800s farmhouse here where some hempcrete would be ideal to insulate it. But yeah, there's nowhere to process it, so I just have to disc all the fiber back in, and
One
yeah,
day,
hopefully
maybe.
someone, yeah, someone. I think that the industry just isn't big enough here at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough. Um, well, if there are no more questions in the chat, I'll just leave this as my last one. Um, do you think about your legacy in farming at all, and what you want to leave behind, I suppose, and how you're enacting that?
32, a bit young to be thinking about legacy, but when you're planting oak trees, it's kind of hard not to, because you're not going to see any significant output, or the the best you can hope for, or hope for, is that maybe you'll see someone climb it one day. But
Mm,
yeah, I mean, I think trees definitely do kind of speak intergenerationally. So whether I'm cursed or praised, I don't know. As it was good Carlow land, big 70-acre field. Um, and yeah, hopefully I haven't spoiled it for future generations. But look, there's still 24-meter alleys. There's still the possibility of putting a sprayer down those alleys in the future if anyone wants to. So yeah, I've tried to kind of have a soft touch, but yeah, I'd like it to be there for a long time, and I'd like, yeah, timber and different products to be harvested from this project for generations to come would be nice, but it won't matter to me either way.
mm. You'll be part of the carbon cycle by then.
Yeah.
Uh, thanks so much, Jack. You have such a fascinating farm and fascinating approach to farming. So thank you so much for giving us your time this evening, and for sharing your your insights with us. Anyone in the audience can see a short video about Jack's farm on our YouTube channel and more info about him on our website, farmingfornature.ie. As I said, this chat will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow. There's loads more stuff on our social media channels as well. So next month, Bridget will be speaking to Joe Roach, a conventional intensive dairy farmer who's big on water quality in County Wexford. So make sure you register for that one as well. So that's all from me. Thank you again, Jack, very much, and we'll see you all soon again. Good night.
Good. Thanks there.